All right, we will be reading chapters 10 through 12 of Because of Winn-Dixie today. So let's quickly go over our vocabulary words. Our first word is pathological, and that means an extreme mental or medical problem. So you can have like a pathological fear of spiders, which a lot of people are scared of spiders when they see a spider, but a pathological fear means like an extreme fear of spiders. Like you would burn your house down if you had a spider in your house. Like that's pathological fear. Barreling means to move very fast without much control. So if you picture barrel, like if you were at the top of a hill and you were to push a barrel down the hill, like that barrel would be like rolling around, knocking things over, and it wouldn't even like care about like who is in its path. It would just like take down anything. So barreling, so if you're barreling through like a crowd of people, you're just running through and you just are mowing people down and you don't even care. All right. Close this. Move it over. It's a little dirty. Ooh. Okay. All right, so open your books to chapter 10. My book, it's page 67. So let's recap real quick. So Winn-Dixie ran into the witch's yard, and Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry told that Opal to go get her dog because the witch was going to eat her dog. And so Opal went to go get Winn-Dixie, and she found Winn-Dixie eating peanut butter from a woman named Gloria Dump. And Gloria Dump ended up being a very kind, nice woman. And so they sat down and ate peanut butter sandwiches, and Gloria asked Opal to tell her her story. Because Gloria doesn't have very good eyes. She wants to see Opal with her heart. All right, so chapter 10. I told Gloria Dump everything. I told her how me and the preacher just moved to Naomi and how I had to leave all my friends behind. I told her about my mama leaving, and I listed out the 10 things that I knew about her. And I explained that here in Naomi, I missed my mama more than I ever had in Watley. I told her about the preacher being like a turtle hiding all the time in his shell. I told her about finding Winn-Dixie in the produce department and how because of him, I became friends with Miss Franny Block and got a job working for a man named Otis at Gertrude's Pets, and got invited to Sweetie Pie Thomas's birthday party. I even told Gloria Dump how Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry called her a witch. But I told her they were stupid, mean, bald-headed boys, and I didn't believe them. Not for long, anyhow. And the whole time I was talking, Gloria Dump was listening. She was nodding her head and smiling and frowning and saying, is that right? I told her I could feel her listening with all her heart, and it felt good. You know what? You know what, she said when I was all done. What? Could it be more of your mama? Could it be that you got more of your mama in you than just red hair and freckles and running fast? Really? I said, like what? Like maybe you got a green thumb. So green thumb means that you're good at gardening, because plants are green and it kind of sometimes dyes your thumb green. The two of us could plant and see how it grows. Test your thumbs out. Okay, I said. What Gloria Dump picked for me to grow was a tree. Or she said it was a tree. To me, it looked more like a plant. She had me dig a hole for it and put it in the ground and pat the dirt around it tight, like it was a baby and I was tucking it into bed. What kind of tree is it? I asked Gloria Dump. It's a wait and see tree, she said. What does that mean? It means you gotta wait for it to grow up before you know what it is. Can I come back and see it tomorrow? I asked. Child, she said, as long as this is my garden, you're welcome in it. But that tree ain't going to have changed much by tomorrow. But I want to see you too, I said. Said Glory Dump. I ain't going nowhere. I'll be right here. I woke Winn-Dixie up then. He had peanut butter on in his whiskers. He kept yawning and stretching. He licked Glory Dump's hand before we left, and I thanked her. That night when the preacher was tucking me into bed, I told him how I got a job at Gertrude's Pets, and I told him all about making friends with Miss Franny Block and getting invited to Sweetie Pie's party. I told him about meeting Glory Dump. Winn-Dixie laying on the floor waiting for the preacher to leave so he could hop on the bed like he always did. When I was done talking, the preacher kissed me goodnight, and then he leaned way over and gave Winn-Dixie a kiss too, right on top of his head. You can go up and get on there now. You can go ahead and get up there now, he said to Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie looked at the preacher. He didn't smile, but he opened his mouth wide like he was laughing. And the preacher had just told him the funniest joke in the world. And this is what amazed me the most. The preacher laughed back. Winn-Dixie hopped up on the bed, and the preacher got up and turned out the light. I leaned over and kissed Winn-Dixie, too, right on the nose, but he didn't notice. He was already asleep and snoring. That night there was a real bad thunderstorm, but what woke me up wasn't the thunder and lightning. It was Winn-Dixie, whining and butting his head against the bedroom door. Winn-Dixie, I said, what are you doing? He didn't pay any attention to me. He just kept beating his head against the door and whining and whimpering. And when I got out of bed, I went over and put my hand on his head. He was shaking and trembling so hard that it scared me. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around him. But he didn't turn and look at me or smile or sneeze or wag his tail or do any normal kind of Winn-Dixie thing. He just kept beating his head against the door and crying and shaking. You want to open the door, I said. Huh? Is that what you want? I stood up and opened the door, and Winn-Dixie flew through it like something big and ugly, and mean was chasing him. Winn-Dixie, I hissed, come back here. I didn't want him going and waking up the preacher. But it was too late. Winn-Dixie was already at the end of the trailer and in the preacher's room. I could tell because there was a spring sound that must have come from Winn-Dixie jumping up on the bed. And then there was a sound from the preacher like he was real surprised. But none of it lasted long because Winn-Dixie came tearing back out of the preacher's room, panting and running like crazy. I tried to grab him, but he was going too fast. Opal, said the preacher. He was standing at the door in his bedroom and his hair was all kind of wild on top of his head, and he was looking around like he wasn't sure where he was. Opal, what's going on? I don't know, I told him, but just then there was a huge crack of thunder, one so loud that it shook the whole trailer, and Winn-Dixie came shooting back out of my room and went running right past me, and I screamed, Daddy, watch out! But the preacher was still confused. He just stood there, and Winn-Dixie came barreling right toward him, like he was a bowling ball, and the preacher was the only pin left standing, and wham! They both fell to the ground. Uh-oh, I said. Opal, said the preacher. He was lying on his stomach, and Winn-Dixie was sitting on top of him, panting and whining. Yes, sir, I said. Opal, the preacher said again. Yes, sir, I said, louder. Do you know what a pathological fear is? No, sir, I told him. The preacher raised a hand. He rubbed his nose. Well, he said after a minute, it's a fear that goes way beyond normal fears. It's a fear you can't be talked out of or reasoned out of. Just then there was another crack of thunder, and Winn-Dixie rose straight up in the air like somebody had poked him with something hot. When he hit the floor, he started running. He ran back to my bedroom, and I even tried to catch him. I just got out of his way. The preacher lay there on the ground, rubbing his nose. Finally, he sat up. He said, Opal, I believe Winn-Dixie has a pathological fear of thunderstorms. And just when he finished his sentence, here came Winn-Dixie again, running to save his life. I got the preacher up off the floor and out of the way just in time. There didn't seem to be a thing we could do for Winn-Dixie to make him feel better, so we just sat there and watched him run back and forth, all terrorized and panting. And every time there was another crack of thunder, Winn-Dixie acted all over again like it was surely the end of the world. Storm won't last long, the preacher told me, and when it's over, the real Winn-Dixie will come back. After a while, the storm did end. The rain stopped, and there wasn't any more lightning. And finally, the last rumble of thunder went away. And Winn-Dixie quit running back and forth and came over to where me and the preacher were sitting and cocked his head like he was saying, "What in the world are you two doing out of bed in the middle of the night?" And then he crept up on the couch with us in this funny way he has where he gets on the couch an inch at a time, kind of sliding himself onto it, looking off in a different direction like it's all happening by accident, like he doesn't intend to get on the couch, but all of a sudden, there he is. And so the three of us sat there. I rubbed Winn-Dixie's head and scratched him behind the ears like the way he liked. And the preacher said, "There are awful lot of thunderstorms in Florida in the summertime." "Yes, sir," I said. I was afraid that maybe he would say we couldn't keep a dog who went crazy with a pathological fear every time there was a crack of thunder. We'll have to keep an eye on him," the preacher said. He put his arm around Winn-Dixie. "We'll have to make sure he doesn't get out during a storm. He might run away. We have to make sure we keep him safe." "Yes, sir," I said again. All of a sudden, it was hard for me to talk. I loved the preacher so much. I loved him because he loved Winn-Dixie. I loved him because he was going to forgive Winn-Dixie for being afraid. But most of all, I loved him for putting his around Winn-Dixie like that, like he was already trying to keep him safe. Chapter 12. Me and Winn-Dixie got to Gertrude's Pet so early for the first day of work that the close sign was still on the window. But when I pushed on the door, it swung open, and so we went on inside. I was about to call out to Otis that we were there, but then I heard music. It was the prettiest music I had ever heard in my life. I looked around to see where it was coming from, and that's when I noticed that all the animals were out of their cages. There were rabbits and hamsters and gerbils and mice and birds and lizards and snakes, and they were all just sitting there on the floor like they had turned to stone. And Otis was standing in the middle of them. He was playing guitar, and he had skinny, pointy-toed cowboy boots on, and he was tapping them while he was playing the music. His eyes were closed, and he was smiling. Winn-Dixie got a dreamy kind of look on his face. He smiled real hard at Otis, and then he sneezed. And then his whiskers went all fuzzy, and then he sighed and kind of dropped to the floor with all the other animals. Just then Gertrude caught sight of Winn-Dixie. "Dog!" she croaked, and flew over and landed on his head. Otis looked up at me. He stopped playing his guitar, and the spell was broken. The rabbits started hopping, and the birds started flying, and the lizards started leaping, and the snakes started slithering, and Winn-Dixie started barking and chasing everything that was moving. And Otis shouted, "Help me!" And what seemed like a long time, me and Otis ran around trying to catch mice and gerbils and hamsters and snakes and lizards. We kept on bumping into each other and tripping over the animals, and Gertrude kept screaming, "Dog! Dog!" Every time I caught something, I put it back into the first cage I saw. I didn't care if it was the right cage or not. I just put it in and slammed the door. The whole time I was chasing things, I was thinking that Otis must be some kind of snake charmer, the way he could play his guitar and make all the animals turn to stone. And then I thought, "This is silly," I shouted over Winn-Dixie barking and Gertrude yelling. I said, "Play some more music, Otis." He looked at me for a minute, then he started playing his guitar. In just a few seconds, everything was quiet. Winn-Dixie was lying on the floor, blinking his eyes and smiling to himself and sneezing every now and then. And the mice and the gerbils and the rabbits and the lizards and the snakes that we hadn't caught yet got quiet and sat still, and I picked them up one by one and put them back in their cages. When I was all done, Otis stopped playing. I looked down at his boots. I was just playing them some music. It makes them happy. "Yes, sir," I said. "Did they escape from their cages?" "No," Otis said. I take them out. I feel